Hi, and welcome to AI for UX. This is the space where UX researchers and product leaders stay current with AI innovations. I'm John, the founder of Brilliant Experience, and we're a psychology-driven product innovation firm. In each session like this, we speak to a founder of one of the latest AI-enhanced research tools and dive into the inspiration and how it might benefit you, and ultimately where the whole field is headed. Just as a quick note, these videos are not product endorsements. We pay full price for any technologies we use, and no one's getting paid. It's just to learn about new things together. So with that, let's get started. So I'd love to welcome our guest for today, Natan Voitenkov. And so Natan is the founder and CEO of Genway, and it's a tool that generates insights with depth and scale using AI interviews. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview and talk with us. We're delighted to have you here.
Thank you, John. Extremely excited to be here and appreciate the opportunity very much.
Sure, and my pleasure. Well, let me dive into Genway just a little bit to start. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit about the target audience for your product and how you're thinking about this problem space.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting question because our perception around the target audience have changed over the last 16, 18 months
Hmm.
since we started building. When we started building Genway initially, we thought that this type of solution is going to be specific for user experience researchers, and we have been building with that in mind. Now, later on, our understanding kind of evolved to start thinking about the market as insights generating functions. So, not only UXRs, but also designers and product managers and consumer insight functions,
Mm-hmm.
etc. Those days, I can say with very high conviction and confidence that the market is actually every single business that has a large enough customer or user base. Everyone needs to be talking to their customers, and almost every single business is able to do that using AI agents. So that's from a top level perspective. If we zoom into it and kind of we try to think about the type of customers that currently work with Genway, I would say that those are growth stage companies and enterprise size companies that prioritize privacy and security.
Mm-hmm. Um, and no, that makes a lot of sense. And I've actually heard a number of folks say that because some of these tools are becoming more accessible, simply that everyone from folks involved in acquisitions to marketing to really everyone is interested, and so it is interesting how it's sort of growing in its breadth. So
Indeed.
and maybe you can just tell us what are some typical scenarios of when one of your, and I'll just say customers because I won't identify a specific target, might use your tool.
Absolutely. I think it's a very good question. So I believe that there are three kind of critical moments in which AI agents can assist with user interviews: pre-production, in production, and post-production. When we think about pre-production use cases, whether it's a product or a service, it's about product discovery interviews, or say, for example, a low fidelity prototype that you would like to conduct some usability studies to get qualitative feedback from users. So would be kind of pre-production use cases. When we think about in production use cases, we came to think about it as an insights protocol, so to speak, a regular check-in with your customers to make sure that they're getting the best experience. So, for example, imagine a scenario in which you will be automatically interviewing 1 out of 10 people who completed their onboarding process on your website, or 1 out of 50 people that conducted their first time purchase on your website. So, those would be in production use cases. And post-production would primarily focus on post-mortem. And the use case that we have been working with the most is customer churn.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so it's And actually, you mentioned that there are some companies that are more in sort of growth phase and some that are enterprise level. So are these typically new products or things that are digital that are out there in the world? What's been most typical so far?
It's a good question. So when I was referencing to growth stage companies and enterprise size companies, I was referencing to them primarily due to the size of their customer base. And that's a
Mm,
very interesting paradigm because initially we used to think that kind of you have to have at least 500 employees in order to be within our
mm,
ICP. But over time, we realize that we are seeing smaller companies from a headcount perspective serving a much larger customer base. So when you think about B2B versus B2C, for example, by definition, the B2B company would have a smaller customer base. But then there is a sub question around the number of users because the users are not necessarily the customers, right? You might have only two customers, say Walmart and Costco.
hmm.
But then the question is how many end users those customers are contributing.
Sure.
So over time, we came to believe that it is about the number of end users you have. And this is kind of what is driving the adoption and what is driving the use cases. I'm not able to say that there is one specific kind of use case that it's a silver bullet, so to speak, that it's one size fits it all. We have
Yeah.
seen customers using Genway for better understanding circumvention on their platform. We have seen customers using it as an exit protocol, as in every customer that unsubscribes from their services, they will be proactively asking him to share some qualitative feedback on their experience and why is it that they stopped using the platform. Is it due to pricing? Is it due to lack of features? Have they simply kind of grew out of it?
Yeah. And let me actually take a step back. You had mentioned AI agents, and so what do you feel like is sort of one of the biggest problems that Genway solves? So and just tell us what for you, there are so many definitions of agents. What are these agents in your mind?
Hmm. It's an excellent point. I think the agents, right, they're just a means to something much bigger. The way we came to see the problem is actually kind of from two different angles. The first angle is the insights generating functions, and the second one is the interviewees. And those are two different perspectives for which the AI agent solves. So if we think about the insights generating functions, those functions have been repetitively criticized for not driving enough impact. And over there, the main issue that we identified is that people would be spending a lot of time in preparing for interviews, conducting the interviews, analyzing the interviews, synthesizing the
Hmm.
data.
Yeah.
But ultimately, none of those drives impact. You can prepare the best analysis ever, but if no one is going to implement your findings, if those insights are not going to drive business decisions, it's worthless. Impact happens down the line, and insights generating functions weren't necessarily able to deliver that impact because most of their time was spent collecting data rather than driving that impact. So that's kind of one side of the problem as we came to see it. Now, the other side of the problem is the interviewee. And when you think about the interviewee, contrary to the common belief, the experience of being interviewed is not necessarily something easy for everyone. It forces you to be exposed. It forces you to say things that you might not feel comfortable with. It forces you kind of to disclose certain things. And as a result, we found out roughly a year and a half ago that people feel very comfortable talking to an AI agent. I would even say extremely comfortable, even when the topics are very sensitive. And the reason for that is because they know that the AI agent is not going to judge them. It's not going to backfire at them. they are not going to offend the AI agent because it is not capable of getting offended, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are kind of the added value of being interviewed by an AI agent. And those are not necessarily the obvious ones. The obvious ones are the fact that it's available 24/7. You can do it on your way to work. You can do it at your native language. You can do it whenever you're available, right? And so there are those two issues that we see. We see the fact that insights generating functions are not necessarily able to drive home the impact that they should simply because they don't have enough time for that. Their entire time is focused on the collecting the data. And then we have the interviewees who actually say that they feel extremely comfortable talking to an AI agent because they feel that they can be very open, get down to the point, and kind of be very outspoken about their opinions, something that they can't necessarily do with a human. And so when you think about the problem space, an AI agent that is available 24/7 and is capable of conducting a human-alike conversation solves for both of those. It allows us to increase the coverage in terms of how many prospects, how many customers, how many users we can get to, and it allows the insights generating functions to be focused on driving impact rather than just collecting data.
No, it's
Now,
very.
John, that being said, just one point
Please.
that is important to mention. I'm not trying to say that an AI agent should be used at every scenario. But there is a strong argument that it is a new methodology that can create a win-win situation, which allows everyone to contribute more towards building better and more inclusive products.
It's interesting. We've found this ourselves at Brilliant, and just that we can scale what we're doing and also accelerate so that we can get answers in time. And so it is interesting how you're really describing the insights function as being focusing more on the storytelling and the strategy, which is probably where they should be. Very cool. Well, and I want to make sure. So
It's
I would
something
love to. Oh, please go ahead.
I was just going to say that actually it is something, the change that we are currently seeing, right? The world
Mm-hmm.
is changing and kind of we are forced or we should change with it. And it is something that I have seen in the past when I was working at Google. Back in 2017, that was the period when Google introduced machine learning into kind of its ad buying ecosystem. And as a result, there was a lot of tension between marketing managers and campaign managers and Google kind of being concerned that automation is going to impact their position in the organization. Now, 5, 6 years down the line, we can say with confidence that machine learning and AI elevated campaign managers and marketing managers, moving them away from kind of more manual work and towards more strategic work.
Super interesting. And yeah, we've had similar things where it's been a very interesting sort of HR transition for folks thinking about how their role is changing. And of course, being first feel fearful of their job, but then realizing there's new opportunities. So, well, here, I want to make sure we don't just focus on people like me and we focus on Genway. So let me bring us back a little bit. This is great. This is exactly what I was hoping to cover. It's very thoughtful of you. Um, what makes Genway, sort of unique or a better option than some others?
Mm. It's a challenging one. Well, when it comes to kind of the value proposition and what Genway is offering, we have spent almost a year building the initial product offering. So for some companies, it's build and ship. For us, it was build, 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 and more build before you actually ship. And during that period, we have seen many companies kind of enter the space. And the solutions that we have seen range from dynamic surveys to surveys with follow-up questions. If we're being very honest about it and kind of we look at it holistically, some solutions out there would allow you to have a scripted conversation and then the AI agent would ask some follow-up questions. Many of the solutions are not even voice-to-voice solutions. There is a lot of kind of mix-up in the industry, in the AI-powered research industry.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah.
Genway developed is actually a human-alike interview experience. It means that it is a voice-to-voice conversation that is being powered by our proprietary Craft with AI framework. We have actually spent almost 7 to 8 months only on that component of the solution. That component is the brain, it's the engine that drives the conversation, maintaining a chain of thought and attentions to details. I think the best way to think about it is if you were to write down a note right now saying, follow up with Nathan tomorrow on our conversation, no one would be able to understand that. Who is Nathan? What conversation or what kind of follow up? And the same thing happens with AI. It's a bit difficult to kind of try to metaphorically explain that. But once we jump into the demo, I would be extremely happy to show you an example of that Craft with AI engine and how that actually enables Genway to create a human-alike experience when it comes to the depth of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. And I know from testing some of the early versions of Alexa and Siri and things like that, that people would ask a question and then have sort of a follow up, and they were like just shocked that it didn't remember that a moment ago I had just asked you X. And that's actually a really hard problem for, a machine isn't built out of the gate like that. And so that's really interesting how much you've focused on that. Well, before we get to a demo, just in general, I think you've touched on this, but how should people think about working with a tool like Genway? And so really how their work would be different. And I think, again, I think you've touched on this, but I just want to make sure you get a chance to sort of get people thinking from that different perspective.
Perfect. Thank you, John. So I would say that generally speaking, we're still at the very early days of using AI agents, and it can be compared to kind of to the invention of cloud, where everyone were trying to figure out what is it good for and how it should be used. We came to believe that there are three kind of segments of customers, and each of them would be using Genway slightly differently. You have the large enterprises that are extreme, that have mature research teams. And over there, the research teams would be using Genway for tactical research, most often kind of projects that their PMs are asking for or their marketing teams are
Mm-hmm.
asking for, and they don't have enough bandwidth to support that. Then we have teams of one or teams of few. Those are still growth stage and enterprise companies, but with very limited resources on the research side of things. And over there, Genway would be used pre-production, in production, post-production, all over. And then most recently, we started seeing traction with those growth stage companies that do not yet have a dedicated research function. And over there, it's really up to Genway to come up with kind of a scaled research plan and help the organization implement it kind of end to end.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, that's very fair. And with that in mind, I'd love to get a chance to have people see how Genway works. And so let me work on the technology just to share your screen, and maybe you can set the stage for what sort of scenario of the ones you were just describing you might be presenting today.
Absolutely, sure thing. So what we're seeing now on the screen, that's our proprietary framework, which we came internally to call Craft with AI. In order for the function to create an AI agent, we need to get context on 5 primary questions. What is your project's objective? What topics we will be covering? What would you consider a successful project outcome? Who we will be interviewing in this project? And any kind of general guidelines that we want to provide to the AI agent. Now, each of those questions has a certain amount of context that needs to be provided so that the AI agent understands the parameters of the conversation and does not hallucinate. And that goes back to what I have previously mentioned. So if you were to write down, follow up with Nathan tomorrow regarding our conversation, You would have a very clear understanding who is Nathan, what conversation, and what is tomorrow. But if someone else were to look at that note, they will not necessarily know who is Nathan, what conversation, and when is tomorrow objectively. If we get to that scenario with the AI agent, it means that the AI agent is going to hallucinate. And this is exactly what this framework is here to prevent. So let's imagine we want to create an AI agent that is going to kind of collect feedback from Jaguar owners regarding the recent campaign by Jaguar. I'm sure you have seen that.
Right.
It was slightly controversial, but it's a very interesting topic. So in order to do that, I need to start with the first question. What is your project's objective? Now, I'm just going to copy here a detailed answer. It's an actual research that we have conducted. Now, this detailed answer includes multiple elements, but before we jump into it, let me delete a big chunk of that. Let's imagine I have a very kind of top-level project objective description for the first question. My project objective description does not cover background information, prior research, existing insights, none of that. And I try to analyze my answer. What we can see over here is that our internal engine analyzed the answer and came to the conclusion that the context that has been provided is not sufficient. And as a result, the AI agent is going to hallucinate. And in order to prevent that, we have provided you with the topics that are missing. So the system is missing any kind of research gaps you're trying to address, the need for that research, maybe prior research that has been conducted. Now, let me remove this context and just add maybe something more comprehensive. Project objective, background information, research gaps, need for research, and let's click Analyze Now. What we can see is that this answer that was comprehensive was validated by the system. There is sufficient amount of context for the AI agent to understand the parameters of the conversation, and we are able to move forward. Now, the second question is about the topics that we would like to cover as part of this conversation. And this is really where the magic happens and where Genway is completely different from anything else out there in the market. It is not a scripted conversation. We do not expect you to provide us with a list of questions and follow-up options and multiple choice options. We expect you to provide us with the list of research questions, research topics that you would like our AI agent to cover. Very similar maybe to the type of interviews you would be conducting with people. You will have some background information. You would like to hear more about their product and the future. Very similar to that. You provide us with the top level research questions that you're trying to answer. And based on the project objective, those research questions, and how a successful project outcome looks like, the AI agent is going to conduct a voice-to-voice conversation, doubling down on the topics that are important in real time, based on the feedback that is provided by the interviewee in real time.
Yeah, really interesting. So it sounds like it's framed so that really, I don't need to be an expert researcher. I can tell you, here's my top level goals, and it can really provide a lot of that horsepower. As someone getting used to using AI systems, I'm always a little bit nervous if I was the moderator historically. Others are great often, but are there ways that I, as the researcher, of course I can test myself, but are there other ways to sort of anticipate what might be the questions it would form or the sort of direction it would take?
That's great. So let me maybe show you a couple of things over here. So from a top level perspective, I would say that AI is here to stay, conversational AI as well. Mm-hmm. But the next 5 years would be about building trust and transparency, building that trust layer between yourself, the researcher, or the user, and the AI agent. And in order to do that, we are constantly working on features and capabilities that would create that kind of trust level. So what we can see over here, once you have submitted context on all 5 questions, you're able to move on to the configuration kind of stage of the project. And now, when it comes to trust, we have developed 3 primary features in order to build trust between the AI and the user. The first one, what we can see on the right-hand side, is our sandbox environment. That sandbox environment should be used by yourself or the stakeholder who operates the solution in order to test the AI agent before putting it into production. So you're literally able to activate your microphone over here, choose the AI voice with which you would like to conduct the interview, maybe adjust the language if it wasn't automatically adjusted, and then start the interview. All the mock interviews that you would conduct would be accumulated here and allow you basically to cooperate with other team members. So that's one layer. The second layer that we have is synthetic data. So if I move over here, I'm able to basically generate synthetic data. And what do I mean by that? The AI agent that you just created will interview another generic AI agent, and you will get an output of 3 different transcripts, which you are able to review and make changes to the project details based on those transcripts. So just to clarify, we're not using synthetic data for insights, but we are rather using synthetic data as a layer to build that trust and transparency between you and the AI agent. The
Yeah,
reason we are not able to give you a list of all the questions is because the questions would really depend on what the interviewee says in real time. You are not able to anticipate all of those ahead of time.
no, super interesting. And no, I can't wait to dive in more detail to understand sort of how it's selecting things. Are there, let me just give you a couple scenarios and see how, I'm sure you've been thinking about these. So the ones that come to mind are just if there is a sensitive topic like healthcare, or how there might be some things that me as a research team want to sort of not go to. And in other cases, I might have someone like we've worked with genetics researchers, and they might have very specialized terms they're using for sequencing and RNA and so on, and how to help the AI anticipate those kinds of terminologies. So I know those are very different topics, but they're kind of related in setting up the project.
You're actually spot on, John. I think that the 2 things that you have mentioned are 2 specific concerns that we have come across in multiple instances. The second one is actually an easier one based on our experience. We as humans have limited memory. And when you have someone new join your team, so let's imagine that you're a broker, and fintech companies, they have very complicated terms like fractions, FTEs, etc. Something that would be extremely challenging for you and I to learn all of those terms. By definition, the AI knows them. So there is no ramp up time. The other topic that you mentioned, when it comes to sensitive information, over there, we actually have 2 layers. And those are primarily enterprise grade features. The first one is that we are able to configure the back end of the system to terminate the interview in certain instances. So let's imagine a scenario that you jump on an interview with someone and the person becomes extremely violent verbally during the interview. What would be the most kind of intuitive thing to do for us as humans? If this kind of situation happens, we might apologize to the person and say, John, I think that kind of based on everything that is happening at the moment, I would like us to terminate this interview. So on the back end, we can configure specific topics that would follow that route. If we're looking for something in between, we are able to do that through the project guidelines. We're actually able to indicate specific topics. They're not indicated here. Oh, here you go, cultural sensitivity. We're actually able to indicate specific topics that the AI agent should avoid discussing.
Oh, yeah. No, it's very sophisticated what you've done. It clearly must have taken a lot of time. Well, let me make sure we have time. And I've asked you a couple of questions. Are there other things you want to make sure that we see as sort of a representative example of using Genway?
Maybe, so I think we covered kind of a big chunk of that, and we
Hmm.
can continue talking about it for hours. We haven't actually looked into the
Yeah.
interview experience and into prototyping and into kind of screen sharing and the output of that, but that can be done on our YouTube channel. I do want to use the opportunity maybe to
Sure.
share our workspace settings,
Hmm.
and also as something that I believe that other players in the industry should be implementing when it comes to enterprise kind of customers. And actually, let me track back. I wouldn't say enterprise customers. I would say any type of customer that our industry works with. We should be extremely sensitive to their data and to how that data is being handled. From a top level perspective, Genway was built on top of a single tenant infrastructure with the data protection officer in house, which really allows us to play by the rules dictated by the European Union, by the US, and by the customer. But we also empower our customers to have those kind of custom level configuration settings, which allow them to define the data retention across all the PII data that is being collected within Genway.
Hmm.
And I personally think that that should become industry standard for our kind of ecosystem.
Sure. Um, no, that's great that you. I was going to say you've anticipated this, but surely we all should. So I understand your point completely. And no, it's very simple to set up here, clearly. Um, One other question I had was, are there situations where it can control if there's like PII kind of things? So someone's saying, yes, my social security number is this, or here's my phone number. Are there things like that that it's able to sort of block out so others replaying interviews don't catch those kind of things?
Yes. So all of that kind of all the sensitive data that is being kind of pronounced or indicated by the interviewee during the interview gets automatically redundant, removed, sorry,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, redacted. Yeah, okay.
redacted. That's the word I was looking for.
No worries, no worries. We got the concept. Um, okay, great. Well, I think we've gotten a good feel. So maybe I can take a step back. Then I'll stop sharing your screen if we're all done, and we can just talk a little more about how this all got started. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll make sure we also mention your YouTube channel in the comments to this video so people can check that out as well. Um, well, I did want to ask a little bit about really, yourself and me. I get the experience of using tools like yours where you've worked super hard at it. But what inspired you to work this hard to create something of this level and make it so professional? So what's the energy behind that? I guess is what I'm asking you.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I would say that you kept the toughest question to the end, John, if I'm being honest here. So when it comes to building Genway, if we were to have this conversation 5 years ago, I wouldn't imagine or envision myself being a founder, let alone to be building in the research space. I had a very convenient lifestyle leading a sales team at Google across Google Ireland and Google Israel, after which I joined a fintech company. Excellent work-life balance, as good as it gets. You can have 2 long holidays per year and you can plan those literally 2 years ahead of time, and you can be certain to take them exactly when you plan to do them. All of that changed for me at the end of 2021. And if I'm being kind of very vulnerable over here, it's not something that I have discussed. It's something that I started maybe opening up to only a few months ago, maybe half a year ago. But I was in the Maldives with my ex. We have been seeing each other and living together for a few years at that point. And for the 10 days we were there, I was actually supposed to pop the question. But instead of that, kind of for the 10 days we were there, she was conducting user interviews in order to prioritize the roadmap for the next year. And that thing blew up in our faces, and we ended up kind of coming back from the Maldives and going our separate ways. And at the time, I did not know that, but that was kind of the spark that would later on ignite the idea of building Genway. And our first AI agent was actually named Lulu. And for 6 months, my co-founders thought that Lulu refers to like this child cartoon or something. Later on, I told them that Lulu was actually the puppy that we were raising together. And once we separated, she kind of kept the dog. And that was the story kind of behind Genway. I really thought that there is a better way of doing that.
Yeah, it's fascinating and unexpected. Well, thank you for taking the time and thoughtfulness to share that. And it sounds like some good has come of that. So that we're happy to have Genway. Um, well, and I did want to ask, even without that, starting a digital product and making it to a certain level, um, just there's so much grind and hard work that isn't like the lifestyle you described previously sometimes. Is there anything that you feel are sort of significant achievements or milestones that you're particularly proud of that you got to with Genway?
Yeah. You know, when I ask myself how success looks like, I think sometimes we overestimate what can be done in 1 year and underestimate what can be achieved in a decade. I wouldn't say that there is a specific milestone that was kind of the biggest or most significant thing for Janway. I would say though that whenever we run into a challenge and we ask ourselves, should we keep going down that path? Are we happy with what we have achieved? What do we think about the things that kind of surfaced or kind of the objections that we get? We go back to the basics. We look at the interviews that Genway conducts, and as part of our feedback mechanism, at the end of the interview, the AI agent is going to probe on your experience being interviewed with an AI by an AI agent. We look at those comments, at that feedback, and that empowers us to continue moving forward because we see people being mind blown by the experience and how positive it was and how empowering it was and how comfortable they felt when prior to that they would get anxious only about the idea of being interviewed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we found the same thing, and somehow being able to, for example, if it's a product or service that they're at talking about, there doesn't seem to be the same link, even if they know that someone from the company might be viewing or learning from them. They're more comfortable saying essentially your service is not good or this product could be so much better and so on. And it is interesting how we're more willing to talk to this other sort of, I don't know if I call it an entity, but this other interviewee. Um, well, and I do want to turn us to if there ever are opportunities for your team to share some of those things that don't divulge the secrets of your specific product, but just there are other publications I've seen, just a handful, on that distinction where people are more willing to open up or feel less bias from the moderator. Um, and so it'd be really interesting to see if there are things you can share publicly. I think we'd love to see them. But I wanted to turn to thinking to the future. So because of the nature of what you do, that you're building a product, you have to be thinking months from now, where will the industry be? Where will the needs be? And how should my product, sort of match that evolution? And so I had a question here about, where do you see the industry and product in the next few years? And I kind of laugh at myself that way. But just sort of more near term, how do you see, I guess, both the sort of insights generation process? I guess I'm going to keep it very broad because it sounds like you've got a very broad audience. How do you see that, I don't know, process evolving or needs evolving? And where do you see your product evolving accordingly?
I would agree that trying to predict how the industry is going to evolve is extremely difficult. especially given the pace of change with which AI is moving. When you think about it, AI
Yeah.
today is as bad as it would ever be.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The fundamental question we should be asking ourselves, whether we build feature A or feature B, is, are we betting on AI becoming better, or are we betting against AI? So for Genway, kind of the two priorities that we have for 2025 when we look forward is integrating kind of non-verbal cues into the interview, the same way you and I can understand facial expressions and intonations. I'm sure that when
Mm-hmm.
you talk to someone, if they get upset at you, you can figure that out even without them saying that they're upset, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing. The second thing that we are working on is data enrichment. How can we enrich the conversation on per interviewee level with kind of publicly available data or kind of or with publicly available data or with behavioral data from the customers that we are working with.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, both are really interesting to me as a psychologist. So we have worked with some of the tools, as a psychologist, I've had, galvanic skin response where you measure sweat levels and heart rate and pupil dilation and all these things. And so it's as some of the markers to different emotional states or conditions. And so even to the amount of thinking they're doing. So really
I,
interesting.
I, I said that before, and I would say that again because I do feel that it's an extremely important point. AI is here to stay, but the
Mm-hmm.
next 5 years are about building it in a trustworthy and a
Mm-hmm.
transparent way, and not only towards John as the user or Nathan as the user. It's also towards the interviewees, but it's also towards the ecosystem. So, in addition to the data enrichment solutions that we're working on and the non-verbal cues integration, there is also a very big question on how do you build that in a trustworthy way.
Yeah, you. Thank you for emphasizing that. I thought you were very eloquent earlier when you were describing how do we build, trust all the different directions. So me as the product owner receiving the data, the person being interviewed. Um, it is interesting when we were doing things early days with things like Alexa so actually some of the Google products. It turns out that one of those was better at actually answering questions accurately, and the other one returned responses in the syntax that mirrored the participant. And people actually, half of them preferred something that answered questions better, which kind of made sense just logically, and half of them preferred something that felt more human. So really interesting to see those kind of thoughts that you're coming up with too. So, well, great. I'm delighted to have the chance to talk to you about Genway and learn more about your motivations and how thoughtful you're clearly being with the product. So I think that really came out. If folks want to give Genway a try, what are the best ways that they can either give it a try or get started?
So the best way would be to actually go to our website, www.genway.ai, and sign up for the free trial. We had it there for a few months, but earlier today we actually released a self-service variation of that. So
Hmm.
you can start using the solution from the get-go. No need to talk to myself or to anyone else from our sales team. Just register and start learning.
Very nice. Well, with that, I'll just have to, I would love to keep talking, but I have to let you go. Thank you so much, Nathan. I really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing Genway with us. And here, I'll just go ahead and just sign us out. So thank you all very much for watching. That's all for today. And I hope you keep up with the latest AI for UX and really insights research. Please subscribe and let us know what other tools you might want us to feature next. And feel free to ask questions of Nathan and I as well. And wishing you brilliant insights with AI.